Welcome to another episode of the Quranic Remedies, where we explore a page of the Quran together and see how it applies to our lives. And hopefully, with God's permission, it helps us heal our brain, body, minds, and soul. So, in today's episode, we're going to be doing chapter 2, the cow, reading from verses 135 to 141. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the Merciful, the Great. وقالوا كونوا هودا أو نصارى تهتدوا قل بل ملة إبراهيم حنيفا وما كان من المشركين. And they say, be Jewish or Christian, you will be guided. Say, but rather, the creed of Abraham, the Orthodox, for he was not of the polytheists. قولوا آمنا بالله وما أنزل إلينا وما أنزل إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وما أوتي موسى وعيسى وما أوتي النبيون من ربهم لا نفرق بين أحد منهم ونحن له مسلمون. Say, we have believed in God and what has been sent down to us and what was sent down to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob and the grandsons, and what was given to Moses, Jesus, and what was given to the prophets from their Lord. We do not differentiate between any of them, for we are submitters to Him. فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدُوا وَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَإِنَّمَا هُمْ فِي شِقَاقٍ فَسَيَكْفِيَكَهُمُ اللَّهُ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. So if they believe in like of what you have believed, then they have been guided. But if they turn away, then they are only in dissension, and God will spare you from them. For He is the hearing, the omniscient. صبغة الله ومن أحسن من الله صبغة ونحن له عابدون. Such is the nature of God, and who is better than God in nature, and we are worshippers of Him. قل أتحاجوننا في الله وهو ربنا وربكم ولنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم ونحن له مخلصون. Say, are you arguing with us about God while He is our Lord and your Lord, and we have our deeds, and you have your deeds, and we are sincerely devoted to Him? أم تقولون إن إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط كانوا هودا أو نصارى قل أأنتم أعلم أم الله ومن أظلم ممن كتم شهادة عنده من الله وما الله بغافل عما تعملون. Or are you saying that Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the grandsons were Jewish or Christian? Say, are you more knowing, or is God? And who is more unjust than one who conceals a testimony with him from God? And God is not heedless of what you do. تلك أمة قد خلت لها ما كسبت ولكم ما كسبتم ولا تسألون عما كانوا يعملون. That was a nation which has already passed. It will have what it earned, and you will have what you have earned, and you will not be questioned about what they used to do. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. God the Amazing, the Great, said the truth. So in these verses, this is a carry-on about Abraham and the people that were around Abraham from the verses that we covered in the last episode. But the interesting part is here, God is addressing clearly the people of the book. We're not talking about the polytheists and the people who have multiple gods or idols, or they built idols and they used to worship idols, saying that God has daughters and sons and kids and wives and whatnot. But the verses start by people saying, like, well, if you're Christian or Jew, then this is how you're going to get guided. But the proper response is for us to say, no, you know what? We rather follow the creed of Abraham, the understanding of Abraham, or the way of Abraham, for he was sincere or orthodox. He was an orthodox believer, and he was not of the polytheists. Now, the word that God used here in this verse is mushrik. Mushrik does not necessitate for somebody to have multiple religion. So if you're associating something, or you're saying that this, like if I say that this book that I'm writing is from God, and it's not from God, I'm associating this literature to God. And this is a form of association where it is shirk, but it's not acceptable by God, because this is you saying a lie about God and you're deluding people. Now, it's interesting that when the word Christian or Jew was brought up as a guidance, as an understanding to get close to God, which these are in reality, they're factions, the proper response is to say that we're following Abraham, and Abraham was not of a mushrik. He did not associate something to God. So it's very clear here that Christians and Jews are associating ideas and associating things, and they're saying that it's from God. And you're seeing this in our day to day, regardless of what religion people say they follow. Now, the simple fact is that the Abrahamic mentality, it dominates everyone else's mentality. Abraham is not concerned about Jesus himself, nor is he concerned about being the supreme person on the world, like we are the chosen people and you have to worship us, which is kind of summarizing the Christian position and is summarizing the Jewish position. But at the same time, the Quran is an example for everything. So the example in our day, if people who come from the Sunni or Shia background, Abraham would have not known who Abu Bakr is or Ali, and he would not need the other sources, and he is not going to associate other things to God. To him, God is sufficient. God is the one guiding me. So why would I need anyone else to guide me? And then people scare you with things where it is not necessary for guidance because God is the only guide. And in our case, here's a book from God that has the words of God in it. So this is sufficient for us to be guided. So anyone who tells you, oh, you have to be Sunni or you have to be Hindu or you have to be so and so and so and so and this and that and this to be guided for you to understand how the religion works, you say, no, the mentality of Abraham is what was accepted. The mentality of Abraham and how Abraham conducted himself was the best because God has clearly favored Abraham over all the other people that we hear about. So we're going to follow the way of Abraham, and he was not of a person associating things to God, right? And then the way we prove this is we say that we have believed in what was sent down to Abraham, the people around Abraham, the descendants after Jacob, which is the grandson of Abraham, and then all the prophets and Jesus and Moses specifically. And when we're saying what came down to us, which would be the Quran and what came down to Prophet Muhammad. Now, this is a perfect example because if you notice what happens in the world today, when you're having discussions with people that are calling themselves Muslims, they say, yeah, we believe in other prophets. We believe in the other prophets. They're all Muslims. Yeah, but they never consider them in the reply. So the mentality of Jesus is the same mentality of Muhammad. And Muhammad's mentality and Jesus' mentality is the same as Moses. And Moses' mentality, all of them are the same as Abraham. And Abraham's mentality is the same as Noah. Now, why is Abraham put in a position where it's called Abraham's mentality, not Adam's mentality? Or Abraham's creed, Millat Ibrahim, and not Adam's creed. It's because Abraham was able to fulfill that religion or that mentality better than anyone else. So yeah, obviously Adam was also a submitter. He would follow the same creed, but Abraham was the one who fulfilled it the most. So he would be the best example on how to fulfill that religion. So when we're saying that we believe in Jesus and Moses and what was brought down to them, Moses and Jesus had to react to the environment and the world around them based on what was required at their time. But they still followed the mentality of Abraham. So what is the mentality of Abraham? It's exactly how the Quran is teaching you to think. Someone hurt you, okay, I'm going to forgive him. But God taught me an eye for an eye. So now I'm going to step back. I'm going to forgive him. I'm going to handle the hurt and the pain that he's throwing at me. People can say that I didn't take a shot back, that I look weak, but I know in the back of my mind or I know in my essence that God is going to get back my revenge because this is what I was promised on the day of judgment. I'll get back what's mine. So this is me making peace in the world rather than being aggressive. But the man transgressed at me again. So I forgave you once, or like Jesus said, you take one eye, I'll forgive you, but you're not taking my other eye. So it's like, if he hit me the second time, I'm going to hit him one back and I'm going to remind him. But this time I'm going to always incorporate God in the understanding. So a lot of people say that they believe in God. And this verse, they believe in all the messengers. But this verse is what woke me up to the truth. It was this specific verse 13 or 14 years ago. The fact that God says we do not differentiate between any of them. There's clear differentiation happening between the messengers in all the factions that came from Abraham. Whether it is from the Jews who say they even put the prophets to a level where the prophets committed sin and that's how they died, which is clear blasphemy at this point. And then there's the others where they say Jesus is literally the Son of God or literally the God, which is a differentiation between all the messengers. And then we have one side that's only talking about Prophet Muhammad, and they consider everyone else just clearly abrogated, that they have no position in what we're getting guided today. So why are we believing in what was brought down to Abraham, Jacob, and the grandson, and everyone else? Why don't we just say we believe what was brought down to Muhammad? Because this is how we make the peace. I'm not going to be a Christian and Jew to get guided. Yet the Christians and Jew deviated from a mentality that came from Abraham. I'm not going to be Sunni or Shia to get guided, even though the Sunnis and the Shias deviated from an idea that came from Abraham. So for me to make peace, I have to remind people that we are technically the same community. We're just not seeing eye to eye because I'm following Abraham, and Abraham did not associate things to God. And whatever people are associating and saying like, this is somehow connected to God or somehow connected to the religion, or you have to dress like this or not dress like that, well, then it's clear. Because if you look at our community, like we don't have a certain look, right? So we're not wearing a certain dress, or we're like forcing everybody to act in a certain way or to do a certain thing. This is the beauty about the Quran. It promotes diversity. It allows us to be brothers and sisters in a community where it's not about your color of skin or your language or where you came from, and no one has supremacy over another person. And the only supremacy is how much wisdom and guidance you got from God, because whoever's really close to God, he's going to notice the truth and he's going to say, this man has more truth than me, I'm going to listen to him. But the other factions, it is a cult-like mentality where they want to paint you into a certain image. So if Prophet Muhammad was alive today, or Jesus or Moses, peace and blessings upon all the prophets when I say their name. This is not something that I have to constantly say, but of course there's always peace and blessings upon them. They don't need to dress in a certain way for you to know that they're pious. How do we know that they're pious? God has this nature, this mark, Sibghatullah. It's almost like a marking. And this marking is something that you can clearly see when someone is pious and he's a believer. How? So a good example is someone who's constantly talking about God. Someone who is not showing signs of hypocrisy. If he's saying like, hey man, this is not good for you, you don't see him doing it himself. Someone who's constantly trying to keep the peace, but at the same time, he's not bending in what God has said. These people are very clear. These people are obviously righteous, and people tend to levitate to them with certain questions. And the people who are hypocrites pretending to be religious, they're always attacking these people. The marking of God is very obvious. When you embody the mentality or Millat Ibrahim, and you go into your day, your life, your day to day, always turning back to God in whatever is happening in your life, then you at this point, people will recognize what they would say, the slight that's coming out of you, because you are someone who's not worried. You're someone who's always calm. You're someone, if he's angered, you're still keeping yourself in control and you're still handling the situation. When things are going bad around you, you'll see a lot of people, they don't want to get involved because, hey, I don't want trouble. I want to be quiet. Yet you're the first one to be like, hey, stop that, or you shouldn't do that. Because in the back of your mind, you're always jumping back to God in the day of judgment. God in the day of judgment. This is purely what the mentality of Abraham is about. So if they're throwing at you things, and you're gonna say like, guys, it's very clear who's marked by God and who isn't, because we're serving him, we're worshiping him, we're thinking about him. You can't sit there and act like a devil and be scary and be like, yeah, I'm a righteous person, I'm fighting the devil by being a devil. Those people are clearly put down, and they're not accepted as someone who's righteous in a sense. Because the people who are actually fighting the devil in a way that is similar to the devil, they're actually quiet. You don't know about them because they understand how hard that life is. But that's a different page that we're going to get to. Now, in the verse before this, in 137, if the people are believing in what you're saying, and remember, the Quran is an example. I can't go to someone and be like, hey, I believe in what came down to Abraham, came down to Isaac, to Ismail, to Jacob and his grandson, or the descendants, and what came down to the prophets, and what came down to Moses and Jesus, and what came down to us. And we do not differentiate between the messengers. People in this day and age will not understand that style of communication. They would not know what you're saying. So you have to say the verse to God, the truth to God, in a way that the person can relate to it. So if I'm talking to a Christian, be like I accept Jesus. There is nothing wrong with accepting what you guys are saying in what regards to the truth. We accept that. That's clear. And we're worshiping the same God. Maybe you are differing on who God is, but to us, It's the creator of the world and the skies and the land. There's only one entity that does that. And we're serving him and you're serving him. So you see, that starts to bridge things. And then you could, at that point, see 137 being applied. No. We worship a certain God and you worship a different God. Well, this person thinking that there's multiple gods, he's obviously in dissension. He's not understanding that we're trying to go back to this certain God that we love, right? The certain God that we are all going to return to, the Lord that's going to judge us, the Lord that we're all going to turn back and see who he is. That's the entity that we're all going to go back. So the Christians or the Jews that understand what you're saying, or the Sunnis and Shias that understand like, hey, you know what? Yeah, he's right. It is about the unification of God and the unification of the community. Those people are guided. They might not believe it in the same way we believe it, but they have that sense of guidance where they're turning back to God. Those people are technically believers like us. They just have a little bit more form of associations to God that we are free of. But then there's another people where God protects us from them. No, you guys are disbelievers. You need to associate this stuff to God as well. Just following the Quran is not enough. Or you not accepting the Bible in its entirety is not enough. Or you need to like tap your foot 3 times on the wall before you go into the bathroom or the devil's going to bite you in the head. Like that kind of nonsense. This is where you start to cut the line so you could distinguish who has the marking of God and who doesn't. Now, another thing that's very clear to say to people, which is easy, like you guys are debating with us about God. You guys say that you're Christians. You guys say that you're Sunni. You guys say that you're Shia. You guys say that you're Jews. You guys say you're Bahia. We're discussing about God and you're arguing about us. But you could clearly see that what our actions are, and this is only if you're a person who's devout to God, not just by theology and understanding the theology, you practically putting it, like say you're praying and someone comes, oh, well, you can't pray like that. Buddy, I'm praying. I'm praying to your Lord. How can you tell me how to pray or not pray? This is me being devout to my Lord. I have my actions and you have your actions. So worry about yourself and don't worry the fact that I'm turning to the same God that you are. Because at that point, you could see who's really sincere and loyal to God. So another example is what's going on in the world events now. It's like, hey, like, you know what? We need to fight for the oppressed. Hey, you can't fight. You can't fight. So when they're saying things like, you can't fight, you can't fight. Well, guys, you have your actions and we have our actions. Understanding the book of God from what we understand, it's very clear for us to show loyalty, sincerity. This is the action that needs to be done. So the reason that a lot of people have these different interpretations or they go at each other is because they all come up with an interpretation that is outside of the Quran. And this is how factions and cults and sectarianism starts. It's because they start to get this idea that is not devout, not sincere, and not loyal to the understanding of God. The religion of God is extremely simple. It actually is extremely simple. Its application might be difficult because of the environment, because people want to complicate it. But to approach your Lord in an honest and sincere manner, God knows your ability. God knows your mentality. God knows what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. That's what you're going to get judged by. Let's assume that I have a better intellect than you. I'm going to get judged for knowing a little bit more than you because God showed me a favor of knowing a little bit more. Let's say that you're more physically powerful than me. Then this is going to be a responsibility for you on the day of judgment. The way that you apply that is by being sincere to yourself and sincere to what you are witnessing. And this takes us to the verse below it. Because now people like an amazing thing about Abraham is Abraham was before the Christians, before the Jews, before the Sunnis, before the Shia. These are the prototypes of Islam. These are the patriarchs of Islam. Like these are the people who are like you could say the top 10, you know, if there's a like a top 10 chart in the day of judgment, here's like the top 10. These are the people who really did well in this world. Okay, they didn't go through what I'm going through now. The Prophet had much easier Islam because they worried about what the Quran said. But as time went on, what did people do? They kept saying, no, this division or this faction is how you approach Islam, and this is what this scholar said, and this is what this scholar said, and this is what this scholar said. And as time went on, more books needed to be taught for you to understand this Islam. So it became about history. But if we're talking about history, well, then Abraham was not a Jew or a Christian, and he didn't worry about all those 40 scholars that keep getting added to every few decades. He just knew who God was and he just did what God wanted. Yeah, so their history, from the Christians, the Jews, the Sunnis, and Shia, their religion is history. And as history goes on, there's more books and more scholars coming around. So if somebody wants to enter this religion, they need to start knowing these new people as well. So it becomes almost impossible. There's a barrier of entry where when you go in, there's just so much that you have to learn and it's so complicated. But Abraham and his sons and his grandsons never had to do that. And yet they are the Muslims. They are the true essence of what an orthodox believer who submitted to God is. So all this stuff that you guys are doing, I'm not going to be asked for it. Okay, now, here is the beautiful part about how testimony to God works. I say something to somebody or someone says something to me. I understand it in my head. Like Abraham was clearly not a Sunni and Shia because it didn't exist. In his head, he goes, yeah, well, that's true. But God is revealing that information to him and the person understood it in his mind. So what does that mean? That person found the testimony that God has guided him to. But for him to not lose the argument, what does he do? He doesn't say what he understood. Why? So he doesn't lose the argument. So this is where God is saying, who is more unjust than one who conceals a testimony with him from God? So God is clearly allowing you to understand things, and he's clearly allowing you to get deluded in things. But if something has been understood by you in a discussion, whether it's against anybody, even if it's an atheist, you as a person who is very loyal to God, as God is saying, it's about loyalty and sincerity. If you understand that your position is wrong, or if God has inspired you with a testimony which might hurt the other person, but it's in the truth, you must reveal it, because you are essentially a mouth and eyes and ears that is working for God. And if God wants to activate you in that moment to either pass a certain message to somebody, it does not make you a messenger of God, but to be used in that specific moment, then you have to reveal your testimonies. Obviously, there's things that you get that are allowed by the programming of God, but these are from the devil. So if I'm sitting in a train and I see a beautiful girl, I can't just go up to her and be like, oh, I think you're beautiful. Because at that point, I'm revealing a testimony that's A, from myself, and B, it could cause her and me harm because she might think that I'm trying to do or trying to pursue something when I'm not. Originally, I'm not. I'm not saying that it's wrong. There is places to compliment, but you have to compliment it in a way where it's not a backfire for the girl to think that you have malicious intent, or if a person thinks that you have malicious intent. So as soon as you're leaving the train, for example, and in the same example, and you know you're not going to see her again, you just say like, praise the Lord who is the most beautiful, who gave you some beauty. You look very beautiful, and you leave. At that point, you complimented, you showed your testimony, but you didn't hurt her because you clearly showed that you're not pursuing anything that is wrong. But I'm not saying that you should be doing that all the time, but I'm showing you how the testimony of God is important, because as long as you're working with God and you are cutting yourself away from anything to do with the devil, and yes, this takes active work, your thoughts start to become more in line and in tune to what the truth is. So when information is presented by you, because of your programming and because of your training, you're going to see, recognize, and do things that the majority of the world cannot recognize because they are being hypocrites or being disbelievers when it comes to God. So you as a believer who believes just in the Quran as guidance, it is your duty in situations around your parents, around your families, in public, when you notice something that you know that this is what God has ordered or God wants us to say, then say it. And you don't need to force it. That's another thing that is clear in Abrahamic mentality. We're here to testify and to witness upon the people. Now, the beautiful part about these verses, people think it's like when God is saying qul, that he's saying to the prophet. Yes, it does apply to the prophet. But it's every time God is saying say, that includes you because you're following the prophet. So you're going to be in positions where people will say to you, oh, for you to be guided, you need to do so-and-so or follow this cult or vote for Trump. I don't know. People be like, no. The guidance is guidance of God, and I rather follow the mentality of Abraham. Abraham didn't concern himself with all of this stuff that you're doing. This world is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. The things that are a big deal to us wasn't a big deal to people 100 years ago. The things that are big deal to us now will not be a big deal to the people later if God allows the world to carry on. So this world is forever evolving and changing. But one thing that is not changing is Sibghatullah, Sunnatullah, wa Millatu Ibrahim, the religion of God, of you as a human being. This did not change since Adam. So I don't care the environment and I don't care what's going on in the world. The mentality that I have will work 1400 years ago and it will work 1400 years later. And that cannot be someone that is factionized or sectorized, because that is only specific to your time period now.